Good morning, Secretary of State. Here's the headline, but what is the reality? As a military bloke, is the word we're not mentioning here China? Good morning.
Good morning. No, the key here is Australia have taken a strategic shift. They currently, and have had for many years, diesel-electric submarines that allow them effectively to do short patrols but not always remain undetected. The world we're now seeing in the Pacific and elsewhere is that our adversaries and rivals can easily sense things on the surface, and therefore Australia needed a capability to support its ships at sea and further its coalitions by remaining undetected for many, many months under the water. That's what a nuclear-powered submarine can give you. There are very few countries in the world and Australia that can do that, and Australia naturally have asked the United Kingdom and the US to help in that.
You and I have talked many times about various defence matters, and I'm not for one moment minimising the importance of this kind of kit, but I thought the new warfare might be cyber. Does a nuclear submarine help tackle that, Defence Secretary?
I think the new warfare is about not being detected and not necessarily getting out into the battlefield in the first place. Cyber will prevent the latter. If you can keep military equipment stuck in port, or keep military equipment stuck in bases because they can't receive their orders, or they don't know what to target, then cyber will have that effect. But also, if you are out and about, because of the proliferation of precision, that even some basic terrorist groups now have access to precision munitions, you don't want to be found. And remaining under the water is one of the best places to hide. It's also one of the places where the barrier to entry for nations is still very, very hard to cross. There are very few countries in the world that can do this. That will keep Australia safer. But also remember, Australia is one of our oldest military allies. First World War, Second World War, Korea War, Malaya emergency. Australia and Britain have been in those regions together, but also they've come to support us more recently in the Straits of Hormuz. They play a global role, and this is one of the key planks for them to be able to deliver it.
And what is the level of expenditure here, Secretary of State?
Well, it's for Australia to set its budget. We've got an 18-month programme with them. We're alongside the United States. The benefit to the United Kingdom is we have 60-odd years of nuclear submarine experience. I think our first nuclear submarine was actually 1962. That means we have a long supply chain, world-beating capability in sonars and optics. So there's a real potential for British industry here to export or work alongside Australia, where they will make their submarines and help share our knowledge. And in doing so, as we develop our next generation of submarine, we'll get the benefit of that.
OK, on to a few other matters, and you will have been expecting this question. We've seen a reshuffle, the Prime Minister reorganising his top team. What do you see, what do you think this shows with the new cabinet, of which you will play a significant role?
Well, I think, first of all, the Prime Minister was determined to bring forward a new generation of backbenchers. So he's promoted into the lower ranks of ministry a significant number of women. He has recognised the good work of a number of colleagues, but he's also done what all prime ministers, I'm afraid, do. And I've been at this game long enough. I've been every rank in government, from the most junior. I learnt my trade from the knee of Ken Clarke, full enough. So long nights and a significant amount of drinking. You must have been on work experience. You can't possibly be that old, Mr. Inevitably, prime ministers have to make way for other people. That's what happens. And I've seen friends lose their jobs yesterday, not because they weren't any good. They were very good, not because they weren't loyal, but because fundamentally, the political bus inevitably comes along. I'll be flattened one day by it. It's what happens. And the Prime Minister needs to make way. And he is by law set. His cabinet can only be so many people. So I'm afraid, it's up and out often. And, it's sad, but that is the business we're in. And, I'm incredibly privileged to carry on doing the job I do. Was one of the friends you lost yesterday former Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab? All my friends. I mean, all the cabinet are my friends. I think you get more done working together than working against each other. Look, Dominic is a lawyer by trade. He was quoted as saying being delighted to go to justice. He was a junior minister in that department. Everything I've seen up close to Dominic has been a man very, very loyal to the law, wanting to uphold the law quite rightly and appropriately, and I think he'll be a great champion. He's also the Deputy Prime Minister, and he's also the Lord Chancellor, so he's in a very good position, and I think he'll do a fantastic job.
It's important, of course, that you forge a good working relationship with Liz Truss, who is Mr. Raab's replacement. How confident are you of that, Secretary of State?
Excellent. Liz and I went to the United States earlier in the year together. Liz has been a fantastic international trade secretary. She completed dozens and dozens of trade deals that, of course, everyone said she couldn't do. If you remember, we would be waiting years at the back of the queue. She's done incredibly well at that, and that's partly because she's a great communicator. And I think in foreign policy, you have to be good at that. She'll take the lessons from international trade and transfer it across. And I'm really looking forward to working with her.
If appearing on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here is enough for Nadine Dorries to be Culture Secretary, can I be head of Ofcom?
I'd welcome that. I think Nick, Nadine is, remember, also a best-selling author, right? I mean, I couldn't write a chapter. She's written lots and lots of books, sold thousands of books, and if being a successful author isn't part of culture, media and sport, I don't know what is. So, and, you know, she's a great colleague. She comes from my part of the world. In the northwest of England, and you know, while she's a Bedford MP, I think she'll be very, very good at her job. So I think she's pretty well qualified. She knows how to sell culture, and people want to buy her books, which is not a bad start point, I think, if you're going to recognise the importance of the culture and media industry.
Last couple of things. Defence of the realm is your number one priority. Shamima Begum, I won't need to remind you who she is, but for my listeners, she is the young woman who left the United Kingdom for Syria as a teenager and then joined IS, Islamic State, whatever you want to call it. In a number of interviews, she says she could be useful to British society. It's wrong to let her rot in a Syrian camp. She wants to come back to the UK. Another of your colleagues, Sajid Javid, has very different views. Where do you stand on that as Secretary of State for Defence?
I was the Security Minister when she was with her friends on going to fight for the caliphate or go and support people that did and join ISIS. I think ISIS is one of the most brutal, nasty terrorist organisations in the world. We saw what they did only recently in Kabul, ISKP. I think she should have, those are the consequences of what you do.
No return for Shamima Begum.
She's not a British citizen at the moment.
And lastly, reminding everyone you're a captain in the Scots Guards. You and I have had some fairly frank conversations down the months. You might or might not be aware of the sort of demonstrations that are taking place on the side of the M25. I appreciate it's a little bit off your watch, but it's caused untold havoc to thousands of people who are trying to get to work, trying to get to hospital appointments, trying to do all sorts of things, with a small group of protesters who, with one force, Hertfordshire, were asked if they could do anything to make them feel more comfortable as they blocked the highway. Are you in support of those policing tactics?
I think, well, first of all, you know, the actual details of the case, I think, is down to the police officer and the public at the time. But fundamentally, people have a right to work. People have a right to a family life. That right, to me, is as important as the right to protest. And I would urge the protesters recognise those people's rights. And, you know, it's a difficult job for the police to uphold the two rights. But fundamentally, going about your lawful business, to me, is a very, very important right that should be not fettered or not interrupted. And I think getting a swift resolution to those people sitting in the way of M25 and not getting in the way of people, many people who are paid by hour, who don't have sympathetic bosses, you know, why should they lose their livelihood because somebody wants to sit in the middle of a road? I think my sympathy and my support is wholeheartedly with the travelling public going to work. And the protesters, I don't think, actually, and you know, my advice to the protesters, as someone who spent quite a lot of time on the opposition benches as well before he became in government, is if you want to bring the public with you, I suggest doing what you're doing will have the totally opposite effect.
Good speaking with you. Thanks for your time today. Conservative MP and Defence Secretary Ben Wallace appearing here on LBC. Coming up after news, we go back to that conversation concerning the incident off the M25. And I remind you, this is what the officer from Hertfordshire Police had to say.
If you've got any questions at all, just ask. And if any of you are in any discomfort or need anything, just let me know. And we'll try and sort you out in a nice way. Can't phrase that any worse, could I?
No, you couldn't. Plus, as I just aired with the Defence Secretary there, Shamima Begum, who, of course, was the so-called